Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy, is beset with many uncertainties as well as endless possibilities. The synergy of the public and private sector is pivotal to the emergence of a sustainable economic growth pattern that will benefit all citizens. Watch Business Trends, the platform where experts, public and private sector policy strategists, CEOs and regulators share their views on the growth prospects of the nation's economy. Watch Business Trends at these times. Receiving substandard goods or services is unfortunately something which every customer will have to go through at some point in time. Now, while the law in Nigeria might not be able to prevent it from happening, it can, however, provide recourse for you and a way to air your grievance and potentially get compensated whenever this occurs. Now, welcome to the interview segment of Business Trends right here on Galactic Television, a program where we share trending business and financial related issues. I'm Izine Egasi. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, you're watching Business Trends. Now in Nigeria, there is a specific body that has been set up to help consumers deal with issues where companies have either provided poor service or they have sold substandard goods to the consumer. Now this organization is the Consumer Protection Council, the CPC. So all in all, the CPC is a pretty powerful agency, and it is in fact the most powerful consumer redress and monitoring agency in Nigeria. Now, right here with me is the director of the Consumer Protection Council, who will be speaking on consumers' rights. Don't go anywhere. Thank you so much, Mr. Babatunde Irukera, the DG CPC Consumer Protection Council, for coming on the show today. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to start by asking you, tell us in real terms what the CPC is about and their role in nation building.
Thank you. And the Consumer Protection Council, which is a CPC, it's probably one of the agencies where its role is easily determined from its name. Essentially, what it does is to protect consumers. One of the primary responsibility of government, as you probably know, is to protect citizens. And that is not entirely in context of war or insurgents or territorial aggression. It is also to protect citizens in the place of commerce and in the marketplace and in industry. The Consumer Protection Council is an agency of government. It is set up by law, and its role is to do that, and that is to modify behavior and to regulate the nature of the understanding or interaction between citizens when they're consuming, when they're purchasing or taking advantage or using services or goods.
Now, from the last press briefing we attended, you seemed like a very proactive person, if I must say. Now, have you been able to implement intensified consumer education, focusing on consumers in order to increase their knowledge?
Well, thank you for your charitable words. And I would say that there's still a far road to go with ensuring that Nigerian consumers are sufficiently educated, are sufficiently aware of their rights and the enforcement mechanisms that are available under law. But I'd say in the 1 year, almost 1 year that I've been in the job, we've done quite some work in that area. For one thing, we've modified the previous approach to consumer education. I know that industry is now embracing the additional responsibility of taking a stronger role in consumer education, and I think that that's the real turning point and the paradigm shift that we need. Once industry carries in part that responsibility, I have absolutely no doubt that consumers will become very aware, because industry knows how to advertise to consumers, know exactly how to get the products down there and how to get them to patronize the products. So if we ensure that they're using those same mechanisms and channels to disseminate the rights of consumers, I'm sure that we would have done a lot of work in consumer education.
Now, evidences available indicates that consumer protection in Nigeria is currently at its lowest ebb, unlike most underdeveloped countries. Now, in spite of the prevalence of unwholesome business practices, what exactly is the cause of this menace?
Well, I mean, I would agree that it's at a low ebb. I'm not sure it's at its lowest. I think there have been times when people were worse off. But like you rightly noted, in most developing economies, the value chain itself seems to be somewhat tilted against the consumers. But one of the big things that I think is responsible for this is that we have not developed the appropriate model for protecting consumers. For instance, in a place like Nigeria, people really look to the Consumer Protection Council to resolve complaints. Now, that's not supposed to be the case. A Consumer Protection Authority is supposed to ensure that the relationship between the consumers and the producers is such that the producers are stepping up to the plate and resolving complaints. But when you expect the government to be the one that does every single resolution of complaints, think about it. You've got one organization, 200 and something employees and 9 offices. How many of the complaints can you resolve in a country of 200 million people, 36 states and 774 local government areas? So it's really the similar problem that you have in most of the developing economies. And until we find that shift and really make sure we impose regulatory standards and requirements on those who provide services and goods, so that when they fail to do this, what they're doing is they're failing to comply with the law. And that's the direction we're headed now.
Now, there's another observation that stipulates that although the Act or the CPC Act recognized the rights of consumers, it doesn't specifically provide how these rights should be enforced. That's as they were merely implied and subsumed into the functions of the Act Council. What do you have to say about this?
Well, that's not unusual, because law in many instances would not provide the detail of procedure. It would at the most part establish a right or establish a duty. And then the procedure for the enforcement of those rights or compliance with those standards would be something in the regulatory process or guidelines. And so the same Consumer Protection Act also provides the powers to write regulations and to make guidelines. And so we do use those powers, and we have a number of regulations on sales promotion and complaint resolution. And obviously we issue guidelines periodically with respect to how industry should behave.
In cases where most of the consumers do not take their time to study the labels and products before purchase, and as a result they do not have full information, what mechanism do you intend to come up with to improve consumer information?
Well, although that seems like a consumer responsibility, and it is, but how you get to the point of full compliance with that responsibility is very tricky. It's not just to put that on consumers. And the approach that I am taking is that industry, they've mastered exactly messaging. They've spent years developing their messages, and they've developed the dissemination channels. And those things work. And that is why people engage in purchasing or using certain products or making choices between several. And so what I'm going to insist, or what we're insisting on right now, is that industry would also make sure that the appropriate disclosures are done in a way that attracts readership, that attracts scrutiny, so that in that process the consumers are better aware of their rights.
Let's take a look at the Consumer Protection Council, its activities in the banking sector and the aviation sector in the first quarter of 2018.
It's been quite some work, and splitting those two. In the first quarter of the year, with respect to aviation, the perennial problem continues to be cancellations and delays, and in some instances, baggage misplacement. And we're resolving many complaints. The complaints are coming. But in addition, there have been quite a few incidents, and I mean, there have been air crashes all over the world, and that usually affects confidence worldwide. People become afraid of flying. In Nigeria, we've had a very good safety record, as it were, but there have been a few incidents. And because of the heightened sensitivity worldwide, because of the crash that occurred in Iran and then the other one in Russia earlier in the year, it always creates sensitivity. And so we had the runway excursion in Port Harcourt. We had the one emergency door situation in Abuja, and then we also had the smoke in the cabin situation on a flight from Lagos to Accra. And so what we've done in the Consumer Protection Council is to immediately step in each of those situations and to provide information. And because you find that out in those early moments and even over a period of time, what ultimately happens is that misinformation takes over. And once there's misinformation, then becomes speculation, there are rumors, and then those are the things that really erode confidence and safety. And so you're fighting from the back. And so we've been very active with respect to at least calming nerves and ensuring that in each of these situations, the airlines involved respected the existing regulations with respect to how consumers were protected. And we haven't had complaints about what happened with each of those incidents, and that I think is very good. But with respect to cancellation and the perennial delays, we're resolving complaints. But what we need to do is to move from resolving complaints to finding a mechanism that really prevents this. We're in discussions with the aviation authorities right now to see if we can jointly begin to consider the fleet and the scheduling of airlines to ensure that what the schedules that they propose to operate is consistent with their fleet and their operational capacity. I think that once we're able to resolve that, we would see the cancellations and delays going down significantly. With respect to banking, one of the first, banking represents perhaps the second largest number of complaints that we have received in the period that I've been there. And we're doing a lot with resolving day-to-day complaints that are occurring, but we're also planning a pretty broad inquiry into banking practices, banking charges, and a few other things. But one big thing that we've done with respect to commerce, which also affects banking, is we're looking at the potential understanding between different vendors or service providers or goods producers and their payment systems providers, which is the payment systems that carries on the electronic payments, to make sure that there's sufficient provisions in the service level agreement that covers what happens when there's a delay or when a price doesn't drop and when a payment doesn't drop, so that consumers are not at the short end of the stick. And that in some sense would address a lot of the banking complaints also.
Now, there are certain discrepancies as regards the role of the CPC and the regulatory bodies, that's the NCAA, as regards the aviation sector. What is the current situation of things?
I think that, I think it's an artificial misunderstanding, and it's really more about a controversy that is created by the debate. With respect to the Civil Aviation Authority and the Consumer Protection Council, prior to my working at the Consumer Protection Council, I advised the Aviation Authority. A lot of the people who were there then are still here now. My experience in working with the Aviation Authority, even now, is very cordial, very cooperative, and very collaborative. And so I think that debate is just more academic or more promotion of a controversy. I don't have any trouble with working with the NCA. And recently, I think the NCA Director General also spoke absolutely admitted that there's a complementary benefit to working with the Consumer Protection Council. I certainly can tell you that there's absolutely no role of the Consumer Protection Council that violates any of Nigeria's obligations under any international instruments with respect to aviation.
Let's talk about the issue of the blue band that is currently going on as regards the inquiry to determine the safety of blue band. What exactly is the issue? Oh, good.
It's interesting that has gathered so much attention rather. And in speaking with some of our colleagues, what I said is that now we've got to understand the new space we are in. Now, this is nothing that came out in the official news and all of that. It was something that demonstration video that someone put on social media, and it's created that much anxiety, or at least that much attention. And so what we've done in the Consumer Protection Council, like we must always do, was to immediately respond. It didn't matter what the source of this was. And so we looked at that and we've checked the science. We have a quality assurance department. We've got scientists there, including food technologists. And the reality of it is that there are certain issues, but the question of the safety of the product is not in doubt. And so spreads are like butter, and they're also like margarine, but they're different. And all of them respond to heat at varying resistance levels. So spreads have emulsifiers, which are food additives, which are the ingredients that you use to bind the food and to stabilize it for several reasons. For its look, sometimes for storage, for transportation, for shelf life, and all of that. And emulsifiers, they're inherently safe. They're inherently safe, so that spread would not melt in boiling water in itself doesn't make it unsafe. And the solubility is not a question. And the way the body operates is that the body doesn't really dissolve food. what it is that anything you eat is going to go through the body system, and the body would assimilate what it needs from it, and then ultimately what it doesn't need goes out as waste. And so that wasn't dissolving doesn't mean that you've got this big lump of something that you do not know sitting in somebody's stomach and killing the person. But what we've also done, so what we did was to put out a statement to say, calm down, this is the situation. But before we put out that statement, we conducted our own test. And we also went straight to the markets and pulled as many of these products as we could find to look at the batch number and to see. And we're investigating if there's anything wrong with that particular batch, just to make sure that there was no production defect in any of that. And we've engaged the company. But we're not doing any of this because we believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with spreads. We have a meeting set, and the manufacturers are coming to have conversations with us about their processes, about the statements they've made, and in part how they convey what their products are, and just to ensure that there's sufficient clarity. Now, the other question people have asked me is that, are spreads safe anyway? And I know that there are lifestyle choices about whether you want to consume butter, margarine, or spreads. Yeah, there are cholesterol issues and all of that, but those are lifestyle choices. The role of the Consumer Protection Council is to make sure that something that is inherently unsafe must be taken off the market. And where things are not necessarily unsafe but have potential health consequences, you must make sufficient disclosures that people, when they make a decision to consume any of those things, they're making an informed decision. And that's what we would ensure happens in this case.
Now, as the Director General of the Consumer Protection Council, I believe you have a lot of prospects and a lot of activities lined up. Now, what do you have for us, or what exactly does the CPC have for us in the remaining quarter of the year?
Well, we're hoping to scale up on the things we're doing. We're hoping to promote certain new initiatives where some big ticket things that we hope would happen in this coming quarter. For instance, we hope that we can institutionalize a patient's bill of rights, something that addresses the relationship of patients and healthcare providers. We're looking forward to broad inquiries into banking, and certainly into telecommunication service provision. Big announcements are likely to come very soon with respect to cable television service that would improve the consumer experience. I think with that, those are the key things we're expecting in the next quarter.
All right, that'll be all for now. Thank you so much, Mr. Babatunde Irukera, for your time.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to speaking with you over and over again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy, is beset with many uncertainties as well as endless possibilities. The synergy of the public and private sector is pivotal to the emergence of a sustainable economic growth pattern that will benefit all citizens. Watch Business Trends, the platform where experts, public and private sector policy strategists, CEOs and regulators share their views on the growth prospects of the nation's economy. Watch Business Trends at these times. And that does it for today. Till I come your way next time, always remember to keep patronizing Made in Nigeria products. I'm Izinegasi, and bye for now.